So here's a good question. Does the time of meals affect weight loss? Well, for many years, we pretty much all believed that breakfast was important. Then along came the time-restricted feeding studies, which reported that having a shorter eating window was beneficial, not only for weight loss, for health. So people started keeping dinner at usual time and delaying breakfast. I actually found this hard to swallow because it didn't agree with what I see in people coming to see me. Generally, skipping breakfast seemed to result in higher body weight. People who weren't hungry at breakfast seemed to have slower metabolisms, and eating breakfast seemed to have multiple benefits on overall energy intake and weight status. But I'm no researcher, so I've kept listening and supported clients' decisions to use a later eating window because of that evidence. Now there's growing evidence that eating earlier in the day is beneficial for weight loss, and that makes sense. So what is going on with research? Well, one of the reasons given for debunking earlier studies indicating breakfast was important was that many of those were sponsored by breakfast cereal companies. So that's interesting, and it's understandable that we might not accept that. I can remember reading a study that found that when you ask breakfast eaters to skip breakfast, they lose weight. But also when you take breakfast skippers and you get them eating breakfast, they also lose weight. Now that actually makes sense to me, at least for the length of time that studies are usually carried out. It is conceivable that metabolism speeds up for those who start eating breakfast earlier in the day, and that it takes a while before it slows down in those who start skipping breakfast. I can see why that if you start skipping breakfast, you lose weight initially, but over time you adapt and it could be detrimental. But again, I'm no researcher. A report from Harvard Health a few years ago said that it wasn't the eating of the breakfast that helped, but it was the type of person who ate breakfast that tended to have a lower body weight. And this could be because they're probably not shift workers, they can afford breakfast, and they had a more stable lifestyle, maybe. And now a new study focusing on cardiovascular disease risk, so heart attack and stroke. And this one has 103,000 participants in Europe. Researchers assessed association between their risk and the time of the first meal of the day, the time of the last meal of the day, the number of eating occasions, and the duration of the overnight fast. And the follow-up for this study was over 7 years, so this was a big study. The findings? Well, each hour after 8 a.m. that breakfast was delayed was associated with higher cardiovascular disease risk. So that supports breakfast. Each additional hour beyond 8 p.m. that the last meal was consumed was associated with an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. There was no association between the number of eating occasions and risk. And each hour that you increase the nighttime fast was associated with 7% decrease in risk. This also agrees with some diabetes research published a few years ago that was looking at better glucose control. They came out with the ideal window being 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Now, I'm not sure how easy it would be for most people to adapt to that, because the most important thing is that any change is sustainable. There's no point doing something for a short while. So I'm not sure how practical you think that is. A very small study was published in the journal Obesity just recently, which aimed to identify why eating late in the day was worse, particularly for weight management. They took some fat tissue biopsies to see what was going on, and they concluded that later meals resulted in significant effects on the hunger or appetite suppressing hormones leptin and ghrelin, which influence our drive to eat. Leptin signals that the fat stores are full, and this was lower in the late eaters. So the body was sending messages that there was room for more. And ghrelin you might be more familiar with as the hormone that makes your stomach rumble with hunger, and that was significantly higher, thus making you more hungry. The late eaters also burned calories at a slower rate, and their fat tissue showed more fat in and less fat out than those who ate earlier in the evening. So my summary would be eating breakfast is good, and eating dinner earlier is good regardless of any thought about eating windows and time-restricted feeding. You could consider skipping any after dinner snack if you're looking for a boost, and I'm interested in your experience, so let me know what you think. To choose a healthy breakfast, go for whole grains, which are much better than white toast with jam or pastries or sugary cereal. And look for protein, so yogurt on cereal or on nuts, a smoothie, eggs, cottage cheese, something like that. And enjoy breakfast. I'll see you next time.